becoming increasingly clear that your brother, Napoleon Bonaparte, with his show of military might, is acting as an outlaw.
Is Napoleon Bonaparte the greatest military commander ever? If you see Napoleon Bonaparte's significant impact on warfare and his numerous victories during the French Revolutionary and Napoleonic Wars have solidified his legendary status. It's important to note that Napoleon's legacy is complex and controversial. You know that epic movie about Napoleon that came out last year? Napoleon was an absolute legend. They don't make people like him anymore. With courage as big as his ambition, Napoleon totally shook up France and the entire world. His story's so crazy it changed the course of history for the whole world. Can you believe it? You know, there are some people who just leave an imprint on history that's impossible to ignore. Bonaparte is definitely one of them. If you've seen Ridley Scott's Napoleon, then you've probably got a pretty good idea of the kind of impact this person had. Born in Corsica, Napoleon wasn't just some boy with big dreams, he was a force of nature. From the chaos of the French Revolution, he rose like a phoenix, turning himself into a military genius. His battles were legendary, his strategies brilliant. He conquered most of Europe, shaping it in ways that we still feel today. But Napoleon was more than just a conqueror, he was a visionary, introducing laws and reforms that were way ahead of their time. Love him or hate him, you can't deny that he was a complex character who left an undeniable mark on the world. You may have heard of Corsica before, that beautiful island that belongs to France. Imagine being born in a little place like that. Not exactly a place for a military genius, is it? Well, Napoleon was born there, and he didn't just become a military man, he became one of the greatest military minds in history. Nobody saw it coming. It's like finding a gold mine in your backyard when you least expect it. Funny thing was, nobody in Corsica ever predicted such a bright future for the little boy Napoleon. Imagine being 10 and moving out of your island home for a fancy military school. That's exactly what Napoleon did. He left Corsica for Brienne, a school packed with rich kids. But don't let that fool you though. He was no ordinary student. This kid was a bookworm, especially into history. But let's be real, making friends wasn't his strong suit. His Corsican accent made him a bit of a target for teasing. When he turned 15, it was time to level up. Off to Paris, he went to a military school this time. The goal? To become a boss, an officer commanding soldiers. Uniform, weapons, and horseback riding became his new norm. After graduating, he packed his bags and headed south to join his first army unit. One thing's for sure, Napoleon had a good idea of what he wanted to become, and in the end, he just did that. What do you think? Once Napoleon grabbed the power in France, he wasted no time shaking things up. Some of his ideas were straight out of the revolutionary playbook, while others felt like a throwback to the good old days before all of the chaos. It wasn't a complete do-over, but he definitely brought back some old school vibes. You see, Napoleon was all about boosting his own power. Every change he made was really about strengthening his grip on the country. So while it might seem like he was just trying to improve things, there's always another motive. Ever thought about France after the French Revolution? A country in chaos. That's when Napoleon Bonaparte steps in. This man wasn't just a military genius, he was also a pretty modern politician and reformer. Napoleon had a vision for France, a strong, united nation, so he got to work immediately. First, he cracked the legal mess. France had a million different laws depending on where you lived. Napoleon said not anymore. He created a single clear set of laws called the Napoleonic Code. This was a big deal, it gave people equal rights regardless of their social class. He also knew that education was key, so he set up schools all over France. The idea was to create a generation of smart, loyal citizens, and let's not forget about the economy. Napoleon made trade easier, built roads and canals, and even started a central bank. So, while Napoleon might be remembered as a conqueror, it's important to recognise his impact as a reformer. He laid the groundwork for modern France, and his ideas about law, education and government still influence us today. You know how they say that history repeats itself, right? Well, there's a lot we can learn from the past. Take Napoleon, for example. Sure, he's remembered as a military genius who conquered half of Europe, but there's another side to him. Napoleon was a master of peace, believe it or not. He knew when to lay down his sword and strike a deal. He had to bring warring nations to the table, broker peace, and then smartly carve out a piece of the pie for himself. It's like he was always thinking 2 steps ahead. Make peace to gain trust, then grab what he wanted when everyone was away. By 1802, Napoleon had finally managed to calm things down. Europe was tired of war, and he'd also built good relationships with the different religious groups in France. Everyone seemed pretty grateful, especially the Senate. They loved him so much they gave him a massive pay rise and basically made him the boss for life. To see if the public agreed, they held a giant popularity contest. And no surprise here, Napoleon won by a landslide. To keep a tight grip on the country, Napoleon came up with a clever plan. He divided France into 83 regions and put a trusted person in charge of each one. These bosses, called prefects, had to make sure everyone followed Napoleon's orders. It was like having Napoleon's eyes and ears everywhere. In 1804, Napoleon pulled a power move and crowned himself Emperor of France. The French people seemed pretty into it too, judging by the huge number of votes in his favour. Now, as Emperor, Napoleon was all about bringing back some of the old school royal vibes. You'd think that progress moves in one direction, right? Well, history's got a funny way of throwing us. Take slavery, for example. In France, way back in 1794, things were looking up for enslaved people. The country was in the middle of a big revolution. People were tossing out old rules and trying to build a new, fairer world. As part of this, they decided to end slavery in all of their colonies. Can you imagine the hope that must have sparked? It sounded like a dream come true. But then along came Napoleon. This man was all about power and money. He wasn't interested in ideals like freedom and equality. When he took over France, one of the first things he did was bring back slavery. Well, he said it was all about rebuilding the economy. Slavery, he argued, was good for business. Easier said than done though, right? How do you put a price on someone's freedom? It was a bad idea and it showed just how much power and control he wanted. It was a pretty harsh move, but Napoleon was focused on rebuilding the economy and making sure that France was strong. So there you have it, a story of hope and then heartbreak. France had taken a step forward, only to stumble backwards. It's a reminder that even when things seem to be improving, there can always be unexpected setbacks. Napoleon was always known to be one step ahead of his rivals and close ones. What makes Napoleon even more famous is his expedition to Egypt. Can you believe that the super famous Napoleon Bonaparte was once set on a totally secret mission to Egypt? Yep, it's true, the French government was so hush-hush about it that they sent troops from different places and no one knew where they were going. Imagine the surprise when they ended up in the middle of the desert. Napoleon and his army won a few battles, but you know that life there was not all sunshine and victory. The heat was unbearable, the desert was endless, and they were always thirsty. Long marches with the soldiers down, and in the end, Napoleon had to pack his bags and head back to France with some of his troops. It was quite the adventure. Napoleon wasn't just about conquering lands, he was also a big fan of brains. When he set off on his famous Egyptian adventure, he didn't just pack soldiers, he also brought along a whole crew of smart scientists and scholars. These brilliant minds explored the land, sketching out amazing plants, animals, and even those mind-boggling pyramids. Their drawings were like postcards from another world, giving folks back home a glimpse into this ancient and mysterious place. Napoleon believed that nobody, not even those closest to him, knew what he was up to. Do you think the present generation hasn't understood the relevance of Napoleon? Do share your opinions on this in the comments section below. For more such interesting stories and updates, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to press the bell icon for notifications. Bye for now.